God, 2001 is 20 years ago now. Oh God, I'm so old.
Hi gang, I said before that one of the things my gaming club's been doing during lockdown is a sci-fi and fantasy book club. We all read a classic and then discuss it over a Zoom call once a month. We've read some actual classics like Neuromancer or The Left Hand of Darkness, but since so many of us play 40k, we also decided to read Xenos by Dan Abnett, the first book in the Eisenhorn trilogy. Xenos was released in 2001 to accompany Inquisitor, a short-lived 54mm narrative skirmish game by Games Workshop. It and its sequels, Malleus and Hereticus, chart the fall of Inquisitor Eisenhorn, and it was followed by the Ravener trilogy and currently by the Bequin trilogy. It's widely considered one of the best entry points into the 40k background, partly because it takes place away from the battlefield. It's more detective mystery than bolt-up porn. But is that still true? It's been around for 20 years now, and 2 decades later, does it still hold up? And how much of the setting makes sense to a completely new entrant? In this video, I'm going to chat to Mira, one of the few people in the book club who had never read any 40k fiction or background before, and see how much of it made sense to her. Hey Mira, thanks for coming on to talk about Xenos. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, yeah. Interesting to be doing a video like this, but then, hey, lockdown, that's what you do.
I know, it's a whole new world for me, learning about Warhammer in lockdown.
I know, right? But you're not completely new to this world anyway. We've known each other for years, and we also go to the same gaming club. And what you don't play Warhammer, you are sort of involved in geeky, weird tabletop gaming stuff, right?
Yes, I'm a keen RPGer. 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons is my jam, although I will play any RPG at any table. The most recent one I played was Adventures in Hobbiton on the One Ring system. Now that kind of tells you how cutesy I can be. I describe myself as, could we call me wargaming adjacent? In that I have a lot of friends who play Frostgrave, Blood Bowl, Warhammer, Age of Sigmar.
You've tried Frostgrave before, right?
Yes, I had to learn Frostgrave because I'm also part of a gaming charity called No More Damsels that encourages women to get into wargaming and RPGs where they might feel nervous because it's historically been quite male dominated. So I've been learning Frostgrave actually to go and do an expo game when the world opens up.
Okay, so, but you've been leading the New Hate Book Club, and so it took a few months of, I think, possibly badgering by the rest of the club to get us all to do a Warhammer book. And when we did, obviously there was a bit of debate about which one it should be, and the general consensus was that it should be Xenos, but mostly because it's not set in a battlefield, which is a good entry point. People find that a really good entry point. The books that are set on a battlefield can often be quite one note. The stuff that's a bit more like a detective mystery, which is essentially what all the books about Inquisitors are, maybe gives you a better introduction. And then, of course, we did the book club and Dan Abnett came and chatted to us all, which was really, really good. But it did mean we didn't really talk about the book.
Yeah, but it was glorious. Yeah, that man is amazing. Can I just say, the reason we had so much debate around what Warhammer book to pick, because there is more content than the freaking Tolkien Silmarillion and Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit and the Chronicles and the appendices. It's ridiculous, Ian. Like, how many books are in this series? What's canon? Which author is the best?
So this is your first 40k book. What did you think you were getting into? How much of 40k, like the universe, did you know before you started reading that?
All I knew was that there are ongoing space battles in a never-ending fight, that there is a dude called the Emperor who kind of had these prime spawn that are not to be confused with Optimus Prime from Transformers. And what else did I know? I knew that there were dark elves or space elves. Eldar. Yeah. Okay, I'm just saying words till Ian like nods at me.
Okay, so like vague awareness that it's a space thing, there's an emperor, there's some story involved. Big question. This is meant to be one of the best examples of 40k fiction by what's considered one of the best writers who works for Black Library. Did you enjoy it?
Oh gosh, I have so many things to say. That's such an open question. Firstly, I really, really enjoyed it.
Okay.
Because what I wanted was space travel from world to world. And what it felt like to me was a detective story with really juicy characters being played against the backdrop of a space opera. So to explain, at the beginning, you're thrust into this massive fight where there are people who have been frozen, who are being unthawed by some terrorists. And I was like, oh, okay, so that's the sci-fi element. And then, you had this Inquisitor guy who was going to find out what was really going on. But it wasn't just the detective story, because then there were things like referring to that massive space opera, because you had various kind of like factions and planets. You did get the sense that there was this huge magnitude, and not only that, but the different places, the different environments you were in felt really different. So starting on this like ice planet and then going to this completely chaotic system with aliens that were really hard to even imagine, knowing there's like a seat of council where you're going to be taken if you're in trouble and stuff like this. So I thought it just kind of really expanded on that idea that this is a many-layered multi-society, and it did make me interested. But one of my favorite quotes in the book, and I wish I'd written it out, it basically says something like, one of the characters is talking to another or thinking about it, and it's like, luckily, the normal people will not know about these space battles. And that made me think, oh, so there's a quiet farming planet. I could see myself there. But there was the bit where they went into chaos. And it was a bit like going into like an impressionistic, some kind of random painting. Like imagine the Scream, everything was melting. So I got a glimpse of this really multifaceted universe. What it doesn't, I still afterwards, I had questions. Like I remember saying to you, so what are the different ranks? Where is an Inquisitor? Where is an Adeptus? Like, how does it all fit? So it felt like a nice tourism into that world.
There is an intention with 40K that a lot of the people in the world also do not know exactly really what chaos is or how bad it can get. So a lot of novels, when people encounter that, have them like not being able to cope with it or going a bit mad in a very Lovecraft way, because in world, no one talks about chaos.
Okay, that makes sense. Those sections were like, I think Abnett did a fantastic job writing about chaos.
I'm always slightly worried that people who write 40K, a lot of them come from a background being games designers working for Games Workshop. Dan Abnett doesn't, but I'm always a little bit worried that however much the intention is to introduce new people, it ends up being so full of jargon and references that it's a bit impenetrable.
Yeah, I mean, I would have loved to know, because obviously they refer to the Emperor and who's the goodies and who's the baddies. I would have loved to know, like when they're having these discussions, but there was enough of the story. The detective story was what carried me through. And I really liked the characters. Eisenhorn, I liked.
One of the things I wanted to ask, there's a lot of talk at the moment about the potentially, like basically about inclusivity, the potentially problematic nature of the 40K universe. There's a lot of politics that I think you're aware of surrounding what it is, particularly the fact that Imperium is like, a really bad place. I remember reading Xenos again when we did this book club, and like quite early in, there's a scene where when Eisenhorn's on Hubris and chasing after iClone, he's also sort of giving you a bit of a primer to what he is, what the Inquisition are. And there's this bit that I read back now, slightly cringing at its edginess, where he goes, my job's a difficult one and you have to kill a load of people, and if most people couldn't do it and you just have to do it because it's for the good of everyone. And I remember reading that with you in mind going, oh God, does this sound like an angry teenager? How much? Obviously, there's also a thing in Black Library, one of the problems of writing compelling, likable characters when by modern standards, their morals are very questionable. Like, they work for this authoritarian fascist government and they believe it's right. Were you aware of any of that reading it? Did any of that come through?
Yeah, one thing that I picked up is that I guess the way I was reading it is like when you watch a war film from the side of the baddies, and they all believe they're doing the right thing. So I was able to read it knowing that a lot of these baddies, inverted commas, have been indoctrinated. I was kind of able to read it in that manner.
Yeah.
And obviously the thing that I liked about him was as an inquisitor, he was questioning. He wasn't like blindly accepting. At the beginning he was, but then, you know, should he have destroyed this? Do you know what I mean? So he was kind of questioning that. But I did know I was in for like, that's why I don't play war games. It's just, there's a lot of killing, a lot of, you know, there was a big body count in that book, but I was kind of primed for it. And I felt that the story kind of not justified it, but I understood that that's what the setting is about. So I just made sure I just kind of got through those bits as quickly as I could, because I did want to find out what happened.
I was also a little aware of the age of the book when it came to Bequin as a character, who is basically the only female character in the entire book, and also starts out as what they euphemistically refer to as a joy girl.
Yes. Well, it's that old thing of like, you know, the pleasure droids in, you know, Blade Runner, and but also isn't a female character that an Eisenhorn relied on killed quite early?
Yes, it's almost the first death, isn't it? Which is also a trope in in that sort of thing.
You know, in book club we were also reading Neuromancer. Do you remember?
Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly not as bad as some of the literature I've read from, you know, the 70s, 80s onwards. And yes, she is very much damsel in distress, you know, and she's introduced in that kind of way as, you know, a joy girl. But I think that, I'm not saying she gets a full character arc, but she's not kind of just, oh, you know, that stuff happens that involves her, and, you know, she kind of gets to have a bit of a time in the spotlight that is outside of like, oh, help me. Do you know what I mean?
Also, you know that these books become a massive arc. There's 3 Eisenhorn books, followed by 3 Ravener books, followed by now a trilogy about Bequin. And she does become a very important and much bigger character. And that balance is addressed. I was just very aware that this is a book written in 2001, and might feel like it.
Also, you know, being part of a charity like No More Damsels, you look out for opportunities to bring, you know, to bring people into Warhammer. And would that book have offended any of my friends or people that I was trying to encourage? I don't think it would have offended, really. I mean, I don't want to slag it off too heavily, because I think it's a fairly generous portrait of a female character, to be honest, considering the time and everything.
One of the reasons we're having this chat is because we never really did our book club, our usual hate book club, where we, you know, talk about a book, except Dan Abnett was there. So well done, whoever organised that. Which of course meant that all of us fawning geeks just talked about all of his next projects and what else is happening, and no one really talked about this book. And God, the man can talk. So trying to get a word in edgeways was difficult.
I mean, he was very generous in that a lot of us had questions about, we wanted spoilers, and he was like, oh, but he tried to talk around it as much as we could. He talked about Eisenhorn a lot. I could tell he really loved writing that character. I could tell that was one of Dan Abnett's favorites. And I loved it when I kind of like jokingly, but actually seriously told him off for making a character who couldn't smile. I was just like, why would you do that? And he did explain why, you know, it's fine. But
I'm presuming that before this book, you didn't know Dan Abnett. How was it being in a Zoom call where everyone else on the call is asking a load of questions about a load of books you've never heard of, and you're the one person presumably sitting there going, that's this guy who wrote a book?
Okay, so I have a friend called Steve Horry who is a mad Doctor Who fan. So now I realise I have heard that man's name before. Dan Abnett has done Doctor Who stuff. But actually, my job really in our book club was just to make sure that the communication and the questions were flowing. So I didn't really have to do a lot of work, and I got to listen to loads, and it gave me an understanding, because Dan Abnett was talking about like where this sits within his ghosts and his other projects and what he'd read and what he understands about Warhammer. And also it was quite good because sometimes, you know, even he was saying it's hard to keep up, you know, with his own books. You know, he'd write something and the fans would be like, wait a minute, if you refer to this page in your first edition. But I think basically there was so much enthusiasm, firstly from the hate book group members, and then Dan's enthusiasm back you could clearly see that he loved writing so much that it just made it really enjoyable. And it made me think, I need to learn a bit more, and I would just be really excited to read another book if it's one that he's written in this universe. I'll be honest, when I heard we were going to have to do a Warhammer book, I felt a little bit like, oh, I'll have to read this out of duty. And I ended up enjoying it. And I think I'll enjoy the next one.
There are bad ones. There are a lot of bad ones. There are
yes.
and that was one of the things I was worried about suggesting this for book club, is we just come off the back of reading, didn't we read The Dispossessed?
Wasn't it The Left Hand of Dark?
We had Neuromancer, The Left Hand of Darkness, Octavia Butler, and then we did this.
I think it was really good to establish the book club because we got some regulars and everyone knew you could turn up and you could just sit back and watch. No question was too stupid. And then it was the right time to get Dan Abnett, because then had he come and it was our first book club, it would have been a blooming shambles. But at least he came when we'd figured out co-hosting and how to manage questions and get them in, all that stuff. So yeah, that's my sort of final question. After reading Xenos, are you interested in reading more? I am. I mean, I have 8 books in my book pile. And then I would love to read more of Eisenhorn, definitely before Dan Abnett comes back. I'm definitely on my way in. I'm not one book and I'm off out. I'm invested.
So there we go then. I guess what's the conclusion to take away from this? That Xenos is still probably quite a good introduction to the 40k universe.
Yeah, 100%. Even if it was just a sci-fi book and not attached to any gaming, I think it's a great book. It's a good book.
Good. Well, I mean, thanks for being guinea pig as the only person in the book club who hadn't read it before, I think. And thanks for engaging with it. And thanks for coming on here and talking to me about it.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Give a reason to get you back on at some point.
I will be emailing you every month saying when is my next appearance.
Cool. Thanks, Mira. I'll see you next time.
Yeah, see you then.